Hey guys, and welcome to Marketing in the Madness. Today I am interviewing Simon Lucey.
I founded an agency called Hype Collective, which is a student and youth marketing agency. We've launched this magazine, so one of the topics last time was how to send nudes safely.
I think that's the key, isn't it? You created something that was helping people. How do you send nudes safely? How many business owners that I speak to that kind of grew up in field sales or telesales or quite an aggressive world of sales, which I do think is so important.
It's interesting. I never really made a conscious decision to set up an agency. I did it because my previous employers were investing heavily in a different part of the business, and I was a bit frustrated, and I thought there was a huge opportunity. And whatever plan you make will probably be wrong before you set it up anyway. So my only plan was I wrote down a list of 15 people that I thought knew loads more than me, and I basically met up with them for an hour and just picked their brain.
Hey guys, and welcome to Marketing in the Madness. Now, just like every week, this week I have a fantastic guest for you. Today I am interviewing or chatting to on the show Simon Lucey. Simon founded his own agency, I think back in and around 2017, that really focuses in on building, I guess, communities and audiences, but specifically university students. So he has a fantastic understanding of, I guess, one of the audiences that all of us are trying to get to understand, Gen Z and upcoming Gen Alpha. So we really dig into how they create campaigns for some mega brands, by the way. Their clients include people like Deliveroo, Co-op, Disney, who really want to engage with this youth audience. And we actually dig into some of the campaigns and the very exciting things that they are doing in order to engage, attract, and deliver fantastic campaigns for their clients in this space. So hello, Simon, and welcome to Marketing in the Madness. Now, I'm going to get straight into today's podcast. I want to start, because you've been on quite a journey yourself, with hearing a little bit more about Simon. So if you can tell me a bit about your backstory, and then I guess what you're doing today.
Yep. Thanks so much for having me. Simon, I founded an agency called Hype Collective, which is a student and youth marketing agency. I guess I sort of fell into it. I went to university in Cardiff, loved it, and was one of those quite annoying ticket rep sales guys. This was before the age of the internet. Well, the internet was there, but people weren't really buying their tickets online. And I was lucky to have halls which you had to walk past to get into town. So I had a big sign, and people used to queue up on a Monday night to buy their Tiger tickets outside my flat and all that sort of stuff. And I was very much in student promo world. And that company, another company that I was working for that's a promo company, got approached by BlackBerry when I was at uni to try and convince, this is the hardest brief I've ever had, to convince young people that touchscreen was just a fad and it's not going to stick around. And we went round promoting that on campus, and that was my first foray into marketing. Basically, it was very brutal sort of, I guess it's field sales, out there trying to convince people of, to test products and things like that. And since then, I've kind of stuck in that space of youth and student space, but doing stuff a little bit more advanced than just wandering around campus trying to convince people that touchscreens are fad. I started off working for a media company that targets that space, and then founded Hype 6.5 years ago. And we've recently been acquired by an influencer agency called Beulah, which is also kind of in our space, but hopefully has complementary skill sets and things like that.
Brilliant. Very exciting. I mean, I guess the key for me there, well, there's loads of things that you've said that are super interesting, but is how many business owners that I speak to that kind of grew up in field sales or telesales or quite an aggressive world of sales, which I do think when you're running a business is so important. So before we go into anything else, what do you think that taught you, those kind of hardcore days of being in field sales and running a business and growing a business yourself? What do you think that gave you in terms of your, I guess, work life or business ethic?
Oh, I mean, that's not even the toughest one I did was in the summers, which was door-to-door sales, which nothing toughens you up like being told to fuck off 100 times a day.
Yeah. So true.
It's brutal.
What kind of door-to-door sales?
I was selling meat and fish, frozen meat and fish.
Oh, wow. I mean, most people,
no,
it's like double glazing.
No.
Meat and fish.
Let me give you
Slightly different.
My pitter patter. So we have a freezer van with 50 boxes of very expensive frozen meat and fish, like 50 quid a box for some prawns or some goujons. I'd knock on your door. I'd be like, I've been chatting to everyone next door. Can I show you my...
show you my goujons.
Yeah, literally, I'll show you my goujons. I'd run to the van, I'd grab 6 boxes, which is as many as I could carry, and I'd almost just charge straight past you into your living room and set up there and work you through your goujons, prawns, all this sort of stuff. And at the end, I'd be like, right, so I've taught you through every single one. Let's put them into 3 boxes, the ones you like, the ones you definitely don't like, and the maybes. Go through, and they said they didn't like prawns, so I put them in the nose. And then at the end, I'd be like, right, so you didn't like the prawns, you didn't like the fish. That comes in £400, cash or card. And then you're just like...
And sometimes they say yes. Sometimes I guess they say no.
But yeah, I mean, it was a wild sort of ride, and it definitely teaches you actually loads about listening. You're like, everyone thinks that you need to have the gift of the gab and all that sort of stuff, and spent most of that time actually listening to what they were saying, even though you are literally just trying to sell some chicken goujons. And also emotional management, like it's brutal. So you learn to regulate your own emotions, process like when you're feeling like crap, and hopefully react better to it. There were days where I just get in the van, I was so pissed off, like so angry, and hopefully makes you better at dealing with that element.
What gives you bravery, I think, and when you've been, I think going into, I've worked in field sales as well, by the way, but my field sales jobs were a little bit different. I was going into, which I guess kind of daunting in the same way, but I feel like going into someone's personal home is more daunting than going into a business. So I used to go into Motor Traders and was working for Exchange and Mart, a bit like Auto Trader, people will know now, but back in the day, Exchange and Mart. And I'd be going in and going, I'd be literally was driving the streets of Surrey, just seeing, there's a car garage, I'll go into it. Like literally that was my job. I was driving around. If I saw a car garage and they didn't already advertise with us, in I'd go and be like, hey, I work for Exchange and Mart. These are the amazing results. This is, I run this region. I want to, get you in. Like, which of your cars can I list in the magazine for next week, kind of thing. Like that was, but going to someone's house, I feel like is an even bigger challenge because you're entering someone's personal space. So the bravery that gives you, and like you say, regulating your emotions, how you overcome those things, I think puts you in such good stead to do anything in life, really.
Yeah, and you also actually quickly learn that the odds aren't that bad. Like, so 1 in 6 of the doors that I'd knock on, they'd let me in, and 1 in 3 of them that I got let in, they'd buy some fish. So I knew that if I locked on 18 doors, I'd get a sale, which isn't actually, when you walk up and down the street, that's quite a lot of sales per street. And it gives you like a bit of like trust in the process that I need to be told no 17 times to get that one yes. So let's just get through the no's to get to that yes. And as long as you do the same thing every time properly, it will convert. And so that's no different to our pitch process at Hype. Like, we try and work on our pitch process, make it really, really good, make sure our outbound converts as well as possible. But then once we're happy with it, you just repeat it, and you don't take a few no's as a bad thing necessarily.
And do you know what? It's funny, the stats you're talking about, 1 in 3 actually.
It's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say in agency world, that is the industry average, probably across most B2B businesses, but I specifically know in the agency world that most agencies will convert 1 in 3 of the opportunities they go for, which relates itself quite nicely to 1 in 3 of the doors that you got let into, which essentially becomes an opportunity. Is the opportunity to convert. And I think that's that probably has stead you in good ground to win, and knowing that from such a young age and being brave enough to go for those things, I think will have helped you hugely in your attitudes towards winning new clients when you're running an agency.
I think if it takes away, like, I think that fear, I didn't really ever it's interesting. I never really made a conscious decision to set up an agency. I did it because my previous employers were investing heavily in a different part of the business, and I was a bit frustrated, and I thought there was a huge opportunity. So I basically went off and did it myself. It was more a stubbornness that I think this could be done properly, rather than like a big goal to one day run your own agency. And I think I would have, if I hadn't come from a sales background, that thing of, well, how am I going to win any clients, would have been like a much bigger, and it was still a massive fear factor and all that sort of stuff. But I was confident that I'd get enough clients to at least pay my salary. So like that's like the number one fear of setting up an agency, isn't it? I think for most people.
It's so interesting because I spoke at MadFest recently. I feel like I talk about MadFest all the time.
Yep.
Big advertising for MadFest, but I did I did a speech around setting up my own business, being a female founder, and had a lot of people come up to me afterward. God, I can't talk today. Sorry, they're going to have to cut this. I did a speech around how, as a female founder, I launched my own business, which then off the back of that, I had a whole load of people come and speak to me saying, what did you need to do? I really want to set up my own agency, or just want to go out on my own. I think people think that you need to have this grand business plan. And I can tell you now, my agency turns over just under £1 million a year. Yeah. I had no grand master plan for launching my agency. What I did have is the knowledge that I could solve a problem that maybe other people weren't solving, and similar to you, was frustrated with the places that were employing me not letting me do what I want or need to do in order to be successful. Yeah. And I guess secondly, I had the bravery and the ambition to want to go and do it on my own, and all I knew that I needed at that point was 2 or 3 clients that would pay me X amount of money so that I could go and take that leap. So in fact, I only needed 1 client really. So I secured that 1 client on a minimum 6-month contract and went, do you know what? I'm going to go and do it. And worst case, in 6 months, I have to go and get a job. Yeah. But obviously that never happened. But I think that people think you need to have this grand master plan to go and launch a business, but it just isn't the case.
Yeah. And whatever plan you make will probably be wrong before you set it up anyway. So I wouldn't spend too long on it. Yeah. It's about just testing the water and seeing. Once you speak to, my only plan was I wrote down a list of 15 people that I thought knew loads more than me, and I basically met up with them for an hour and just picked their brains, and then trying to figure out exactly where Hype could fit into the ecosystem of all the agencies that brands are using, and who we're against and who we're with, and all that sort of stuff. But then I think the flip of it, obviously, that decision to set up your agency is, I think, such a big decision, and I think the privilege of coming into it, firstly from a sales background, but also it's so much easier for guys, it's so much easier for white people, where you've got that sort of I don't know, it's almost like an arrogance to be able to be like, yeah, but it'll be fine, because it always has been fine basically, and you've got that reserve to build on basically. So yeah, I do think it's interesting amongst my peer group. I just see loads of guys that look like me. Some of them have bigger beards, who are about to set up their own agency or setting up their own agency, and I just think it's that stereotype is 100% true, and it's because of the journey that they've been on to get them there, which makes them feel confident to make that decision basically.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because obviously I do talk a lot about women in business in particular, but especially women running agencies or in the creative sector, marketing sector. So what do you think can be done, if anything, to level the playing field a little bit?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a mean question, because it is. You do see. I mean, not say white middle age, but men in their certainly 30s, 40s, running their own businesses.
All look like me.
It. I hope is starting to change. I think some of it is, personally, is certainly for women, sometimes our own limiting beliefs and preconditioned behaviours that we have inherited essentially from years and years of people, not being brave enough to step forward into the limelight to run their own business. So I hope, well, in one thing in this podcast that people are listening to, that inspires, because there should be no difference. And actually, anyone can do this. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, male, female, young, old, whether you're a 50-year-old, a 20-year-old. If you've got the confidence, you've got the know-how, and you really feel that you can make a difference, then be brave enough to give it a go.
Yeah, I think broadly there's probably two, there's the external factors where there's people still with bias against female founders or people of color or whatever, and those things are very, very difficult to confront and change. And on an individual level, we need to all lobby for change, and that's a big cumulative thing. But then there's the thing that personal to that founder, and I think often it's just introductions, connections, and also that knowledge and access to that knowledge. So I just think coaching and mentoring for young talent is the best thing that you can do. If you've got a 25-year-old in your team that's awesome, get them an awesome coach or an awesome mentor, because they will appreciate it. They will stay longer until maybe they do go off and found their own agency. But hey, what a lovely way for someone to leave. And I think that's the best thing that you can do to actually build the odds of that person kind of going off and doing something different, whether it's not everyone needs to launch their own agency to be happy, I can assure you that.
Yes.
But whatever it is, I think that often it's access to connections and knowledge that is kind of guarded amongst that kind of group of guys, basically, that is unfair. And so I think that coaching and mentoring at a young age is really, really important for actual change.
Yeah, I want to say pass it down or pass it up, or sharing that knowledge with anyone and everyone.
There's amazing organisations that are already doing things in their space, but they just probably need more funding, more coaches, more mentors, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Pay it forward, guys. That is key. I'm so with you on that. So I'm gonna dig into the subject that I guess this podcast is all about, which is around the innovations in marketing. So the agency that you launched way back when had a very specific niche. And I often also talk about the importance of niching in B2B marketing. Super, super important. So tell us about the opportunity that you spotted and a little bit more around the agency that you went on to launch and what you guys did. Yeah.
So we've always worked marketing students, and that's our speciality. We hope that nobody knows university and the education space better than us, but that doesn't mean that we're channel experts. We will pick and choose channels, and that's changed. So the first offering that we had was very specific, that we would organise sponsoring sports teams or societies at scale. So I found out one of the big four accountancy firms was spending something a couple of £100,000 sponsoring sports teams and societies across the country as a graduate recruitment exercise. And they told me that they couldn't track a single application or click to it. And I was like, what an eye-watering amount of money. And I was like, what if we take a cut and we actually run it rigidly and make it happen? And that snowballed. Now most of what we do is events and influencer activity. I think in terms of innovation, we've got a team of 12 in head office, but over the last year I've worked with over 1,000 creators. And I think that TikTok and platforms like it have democratized the ability to make good content. So we can batch make content much quicker and much more reactively. Interesting at the cost that you can take risks. So for example, we work with Deliveroo quite a lot on rider recruitment. And I spent lots of time kind of thinking about what should be our core message here, and we work with a creative guy in his 30s with a beard to think up what the messages should be. But because the cost per video is quite low, we could afford to take risks. So we tested out 10 different messages and then put them all into paid to see which one worked best. And turns out the ones that we thought were going to work were completely miles off.
Wow.
And I thought it all about people would have concerns about running for Deliveroo, how much do you get paid? It seems sketchy, that's not per hour, that sort of stuff. Actually, people like the idea of it being super flexible and fitting alongside a busy, successful lifestyle, which my bias was running for Deliveroo isn't a successful thing to do.
Yeah.
That's my personal bias. Actually, our audience were this is great because it can slot along if I want to be working on something else at this period, I can do it whenever I want. And so that what we've kind of pivoted to is, if you come to us with a brief at the moment, we will say we don't have the best creatives, and we we don't aim to. Instead, what we will do is batch make content across different messages, allow you to push things and test the boat. And like one of our clients said to us the other day, is like the reason this works really nicely is actually if the content doesn't land, no one even sees it because the algorithm decides it. So he was like, so I'm happy to take a risk because people won't actually see it if it's not good. We have them set up. We can create, all these different messages quickly. We'll then learn from that from paid and then refine the brief every single time so that then we're narrowing down and creating different rules for different brands about sort of every single video that gets made.
I love that. What a great content. And also a great client that's trusting you to actually put the content out and test it with the audience and then, go with the one that does the best, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It takes it's kind of a bit humbling as an agency to be like, actually the ideas from your community and your audience are actually sometimes better and also told in ways that people want to engage with. Like we found that the way we kind of discovered this is we made some quite slick ads for one client and had a bit of budget left over. We spent ages making these ads and they looked really nice and they're really professionally shot. And then we had a bit of budget left over and we got Emma, she's now an account exec with us, but she was just a creator based in Nottingham to shoot some stuff in her bedroom. And Emma's stuff completely outperformed all the stuff that we spent loads of time, effort and money on. And we're like, God, we need to like really review kind of what ads are working. So I think that user generated tone, is definitely performing better. And I also think that on paid platforms, you're having to change your creative more frequently now. I sort of think that like on TikTok, the ideal ad spend behind a video is no more than 5K. So if you're spending 5K on the ad, you don't really want to spend more than like £1,000 on the video, really, like maybe less. So you can't go to a big production company. It has to be kind of user created.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, how the world has changed. And we all used to think a bit like this, beautiful recording studio that we're sat in at the moment, that we had to have this super polished content, that everything had to be, shot. And sometimes it does, of course, like, ads on TV. There are certain things that will need to be put together. The anonymous Christmas ad, isn't, I don't know, maybe they should try a different tack, but
I love it.
I think there are certain things that need to have that polish. But actually we see this hugely in the world of B2B. It's got to be human, it's got to be real, and it's got to be believable. And that user generated content that people can create in a quite a basic environment themselves at home is often more trusted by certainly the youths of today. But I think probably even, me, if you can relate to something and you don't think it's overly curated and it's real, you're much more likely to buy into that often. And I think we created this, this, oh my gosh, everything must be perfect kind of scenario in our heads when it really doesn't need to be.
Yeah, I've got this theory with absolutely no data to back it up. But like when ads were first made, they were made for TV, and like you think of like the famous Guinness ad with the horses in the sea and stuff like that. And it was always going to be shot to go alongside like a TV program that had like £10 million to make a TV program, so it must be £1 million to make an ad. But now the content, like most of the social content, is sat next to videos that cost nothing to produce. So if you actually have a really slick video on TikTok or Instagram, it feels quite out of place, and it feels jarring. And I think people don't really think about what the content is sat next to. They just think, let's make it really, really good. I think it's complementing the world that the ad is sat in as opposed to jarring with it is important.
Yeah, so important. And I think that's you're so right. Like the content that we, I guess, engage with is now usually probably more so. I mean, I'm not quoting any verified stats here, guys, but usually is now on, is on TikTok for kids. Like last night, me and my daughter were watching TV. She's not watching the adverts. When the adverts are on, I mean, if we even watch programs that have adverts nowadays, because usually we're on Netflix and they don't really have ads, but she's consuming content on TikTok. If we are watching it on TV and there's ads on, she's straight on TikTok. She's not even watching the adverts. So I think it really does play back to understand the platform that you're on, what's happening, what are the trends on those platforms, how do people want to engage with those platforms, who are your audience, and don't think that you have to spend huge amounts of money or time to curate this perfect content, make it real, and actually you might be able to do it cheaper, go to market more quickly, and have a more effective campaign anyway.
Yeah, I think for agencies, there's going to be like the top bracket of content is always protected. Like I think like some of the Nike stuff that was beautifully shot around the Women's World Cup, like I was like, this stuff is like dream. And then I think the bottom is exploding. I think it's actually that middle tier where like there's no need for like a mid-value video anymore. Like you need something that's either banging or user created. I think that like middle slot. Sorry, I just touched my microphone there.
That's right. Don't worry. You can move it by the way if you want to give yourself more.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'll say again, but yeah, I think it's that middle slot of content that really like is there that demand for it at the moment. I think it's the beautiful and the user generated that is needed.
Well, on that, tell me about your best ever campaign that you've guys, I guess in terms of results, really digging into the innovations. What have you guys done that you can stand behind and be super proud of, that I guess, maybe, I mean, it doesn't even have to be something different. Let's just talk about what you did that was awesome.
Well, I think like, but when I set up Hype, I always thought it'd be like the big brand stuff. Like, we've got amazing clients, Co-op, Adobe, Lloyd's, people like that. And I always thought it'd be like that sort of stuff. Actually, weirdly, the one that I love the most is a little bit outside. We work for Neighborhood Watch, right? Not exactly your classic 18 to 25-year-old brand. Like you always think of like, granddad's twitching around the window, that sort of thing. And we launched this magazine, which goes old school magazine that goes out across universities, which is completely created by students, about kind of student safety issues. So like one of the topics last time was like how to send nudes safely. Love
that.
One was like a big gay night out in Nottingham, like what to look out for. And then off the back of it, we ran like training for society and sports team leaders about like what to look out for if someone gets spiked, what to do in the event of like violence on a night out and that sort of stuff. And it was so that our brief was to reinvent Neighborhood Watch for younger people, basically. And when we got the brief through, we were like, "What are we doing? Like this is not Adobe or whatever." But they were great. They hadn't done much work in this space and were like really open-minded and took our ideas on board. And the magazine like looks beautiful, and it's all illustrated and created by students. I met my business partner editing the student magazine, so I'm biased. I finally got to get a magazine out. But yeah, that's the one that I always think I'm like kind of surprisingly like always look back on really fondly. I loved it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like some really good information in there. Can you remember, how do you send nudes safely? Because, this is, I was going to say, this is knowledge that I want to have. This is knowledge we all need.
Okay, this is a different podcast.
Yeah.
I will send it in the follow-up. Yes. I will send the full description. But I can't remember.
I guess now it's send a nude with one of those disappearing messages.
WhatsApp's made it easier for you since that.
Yeah. But I think
don't put your face in it. That's important.
Yes. Very important. Yeah. No revealing elements. Part of your body. No tattoos. Yeah. There we go, guys. All the information that you need and more today. But I think that's the key, isn't it? You created something that was helping people probably solve the problems that are keeping them up at night. The students really wanted to whether it be about sending nudes or whatever, you created content that was really needed by the students and took the time, I guess, alongside Neighborhood Watch to understand exactly what it is that, the students wanted help with. Yeah,
I mean, Neighborhood Watch from the get-go we're not the people to like sort of, they're like, we exist to make communities feel safer and safer, but they're like, but we are, not big players in the space, not very comfortable. So they set up we set up on their behalf like a student council who led the direction and came up with the idea of this magazine and then set the agenda for the topics and the training. Like, the safety stuff on a night out was quite like very explicit in that it dealt with the fact that like sexual violence is a thing and it's going to happen, and was kind of like quite groundbreaking in terms, like we work with a lot of kind of expert charities within the space to get quite radical advice that you probably wouldn't expect to get from Neighbourhood Watch, and that's why I think the whole point is, like, if you're looking to target your audience, like, work with them and coordinate with them, and they'll appreciate as well that, like, all those 10 people got paid work experience. It cost Neighbourhood Watch really nothing to pay them for that time, but the insights that they got made the campaign so much better.
Yeah, well, I think by the sounds of things, everything that you guys do, you're really listening and taking time to understand the wants and needs of your audience, but be that by pushing out things on paid advertising and see what works best, or actually working with them to curate and understand the kind of content that they want to I guess digest in whatever way they want to digest it. Super important. And I think people forget to do that sometimes. They come up with these grand ideas thinking we know the answer, and they actually forget to engage their audience. And that idea will always have the bias of the people that have made it, because it's normally made in London in an ad agency office with, like, a nice office with lots of post-it notes and all that sort of stuff, and the stereotype. But like, and then the reason why I kind of bang on about co-creation is because research is so, firstly, time consuming and quite expensive. And it's really hard to do well because you don't actually know what you don't know. So you don't know what questions you should be asking. So if we run a research project for Neighbourhood Watch to find out what, topics we should be focusing on and how we do it, I don't think we would have got to where we did, because, it's that time actually, sharing the problem with your audience and what you're trying to achieve will get you much better results if you share it with them. And then, it will require some polishing and all that sort of stuff. There is still a need for an agency. But I think there's still a requirement for research, but this can save you some money on it, basically. Nice. It's very interesting, and especially the audience that you're working with, that I think so many brands, businesses are trying to understand and navigate how they engage them. So you obviously are working with youth market, which at the moment Gen Z, but soon will be Gen Alpha.
So,
which we're about to find out a lot about over the next few years. But are there any specific trends that you're seeing or behaviours that you're seing in Gen Z? Because you've been working with university goers, I guess, since you were at university. So what have you seen that's changed, and what should brands and businesses and marketeers know about now in terms of how they engage with them?
I think the first thing is it's really hard to know. Like, I think there's so many oversimplifications. Like, if you Google this online, everyone say they don't drink and whatever. Like, I think that's absolute rubbish. I think maybe they drink slightly less than like my demographic did when we were at uni, but that is a bloody high base.
I mean, we were probably, I'm assuming we're similar-ish age.
And it was a problem.
But binge drinking, just not, I would agree it's different, but to say they don't drink, well, I know my 15-year-old is always asking me to buy her alcohol, so I can vouch for the fact that it is not, it's not quite as plain as people believe it is. It really is not.
And I think it's like, I guess it's more fragmented. Like, the things that have changed is how they access information. So, TikTok has completely changed the game. Like, TikTok is a search engine first and foremost. I think, like, if we were running a focus group about like travel the other day, and they were talking about how they plan a trip, and the first thing they do is go to TikTok to, if they're going to Valencia for a weekend, they'll go to TikTok to research all the things to do, and then go to Google to book it, which I think is really interesting from a marketing point of view, because if you've got somebody in your team that's doing the TikTok work and somebody who's doing the Google work, this Google person is going to get all the plaudits because all the bookings have come through Google, but the research has all happened on TikTok. So
that is so true though. And again, because of my 15-year-old, I can vouch for this. Like, we went to Mykonos and she was like, cool mum, I'm going to go onto TikTok and I'm going to find us all the cool trending places that we need to go. And she did
create a saved list. It's all super organized. Like, they've all got a folder and they've got, these are my Mykonos videos. Like, it's all super organized. So I do think the industry has a tendency to over-exaggerate behavioural change and say that the kids don't drink anymore, they're all entirely woke. I mean, they're not all woke. There are some problematic ones. But then underplay the importance of like the actual how they receive information and the impact that that's having. And I think so. I'm always a bit cynical if people say this generation is the most climate conscious or whatever. Like, I think the climate is important, but I think also we've all gone through a bit of an awakening of the climate, and I think like it's not like, I don't think these changes are as significant as we play out. I think it's just more how they receive information, how they engage with, the internet is different, basically.
Totally agree. And I think assumptions cannot be made in any way anymore, but we do need to understand. I think there are things, exactly like we were just saying, like people searching. I mean, and again, they're not all going to search on TikTok, but how they behave in terms of how they find things and the platforms that they use, because that's been such a huge part of their lives. It's very, very different to what we grew up. So that's the biggest things I think brands need to recognise. It's not about, oh yes, they're all not drinking and they're all care about the climate, because some of them will and some of them won't. But in terms of how they search for things, how they do things, and the digital world that they live in is very different to the digital world that I live in, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that then the way they receive information can actually come full circle to drive behavioural change. And I was talking to a group about like whether they'd consider solo travel. So solo travel, like lots of people have travelled on their own as gap years and that sort of thing for a long time, but at least conversation about it and searches of it are going up. Whether actual solo travel is going up, I'm not sure, but it's certainly a more talked about topic. And the students were saying to me that they feel that their like loneliness traveling alone isn't so much of an issue, because they're like, even just like walking down the street voice noting their mate, they're like, that's essentially like the same relationship that we have if we were together. And so that like security blanket of having your your friends in a digital world means that you're more willing to take a risk and go traveling on your own and see if you like it, which is interesting.
Yeah, so there we go. We've circled back here, because what we're doing is we're bringing up a braver generation, and I do think there's definitely something in that. It'd be really interesting to see. I mean, I also do think that there's lots of hype that unfortunately maybe Gen Z hear more of, and they don't hear or see the reality of, is because social media promotes things like the quick wins in the world. Like, I invested $1,000 in crypto and woke up the next day and was worth 40 million or whatever. They hear these success stories, but they don't hear the real stories around those smaller marginal gains. So social media's got a role to play. I mean, of course it's exciting, right? The quick wins, a bit like what lottery wins when we were younger.
I think they're holding themselves to such a high standard. Like, I always say to people that when I was 25, I was so useless. Working in a useless job. Sorry to my former employers, but I wasn't doing a very good job either. Like, and now, like, in theory, I'm like what society would deem as successful, run my own agency and all that sort of stuff. But like, I think if you speak to a 25-year-old who was doing my job at that stage, now they'd be like, I'm a down and out. There's no possible way to success, because they're surrounded by this information of people excelling and doing really well. And like, you're so unlikely to get your dream job out of university that a small number of people will do it, but most people will dislike their first job out of university and just learn loads and find out what they actually like, and that's totally fine, or out of school as well. And
that's the thing, it's expectations up here, and then the reality of what you need to do to get there isn't quite matched sometimes. It's tough. So my last question to you today, Simon, and this is something that I ask pretty much all of my guests, and we haven't briefed you, because we're mean. If you had someone in your inner or wider circle that you would recommend to be on the podcast, that you think our lovely listeners could learn from, like they have from you today, is there anyone that jumps to mind that you could introduce us to, that we could get on the pod, that that you think would be amazing, interesting, and uncover even more marketing innovations?
I don't know if she's been on the pod, so if she has been on the pod, I'm sorry. Do you know Shani Mears at the Elephant Room?
No, I don't. Tell me more.
Shani Mears is excellent. She's so smart. She's done more for, I don't know. She's done loads for diversity in London, more than I think she's affected more change than anyone else I've come across. She set up a mailing list, which is such a simple thing called the guest list, so Shani's black, from the West Midlands, bit of a high flyer, got invited to loads of industry events and quite often couldn't go. So she said, I'm going to give my tickets to people that need them. So set up this mailing community called the guest list. It's now like a couple of thousand young creative types, like literally every single skill set you need is there now. If you need somebody that's like a photographer, videographer, researcher, whatever it is, it's in there, but it's just not the standard community that you'd normally get access to. And every day, like, I have to siphon off the emails because it would dominate my inbox too much, but like thousands of opportunities are shared in there every single week to people that wouldn't normally come across them, and it's grown so big. I think she's just done, like, it's such a simple thing, but whenever anyone's like, oh, how do I recruit diverse talent, I'm like, just email the guest list. Like, it's the lazy option, it's so good, and you will get like access to talent that wouldn't normally be searching in the normal ways, basically.
Love that. And it touches on a subject which I am super interested in, which is around community marketing.
Yep.
So I would welcome an introduction to Shani, and I would definitely be trying to get her on the show so she can share, some of the amazing things that she's been doing. And it sounds like there's a lot.
Yeah, she's very cool.
Brilliant. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today. You have been an amazing guest. You've really inspired me to think about, well, I guess the last point, which is super interesting, how I can recruit more diverse talent, but also how we can be positioning ourselves to market better to the youth of today and that very important market. So yeah, big thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great.
Hey guys, it's me again, Katie Street. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, I want to ask you a really big favour because it will help us reach and help more people. Can you head over to Spotify and or Apple Podcasts and give us a little 5-star review? On Apple Podcasts, you can also leave us a little comment about what you love. I love to hear from you. We're only a few weeks into launching the podcast and we've already had some fantastic reviews. I love hearing from you. Please, any tips, anything you want more of, less of, feel free to put it there in the comments. But yeah, a big thank you. Do go give us a follow, and I hope to see you back here very soon.